right. Well, you guys want to go ahead and kick it off? Okay,
Sure.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to Martin Saunders. He's a professor of trumpet at Marshall University, and he's going to be running a session of distinguished panelists. We're going to be talking about how to overcome issues dealing with self doubt, something I think none of us here have ever struggled with, ever. Never had a doubt about anything related to anything. I wish that were the case. So go ahead, Martin. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. We're going to be talking about self-doubt. And like Dr. Sievers talked a little while ago, everybody experiences frustrations, and those can accumulate and cause us a world of hurt sometimes. Self-doubt can be broken down into a lot of different areas and come in different ways. That can be from something like stage fright, which a lot of people do experience. That can be from something like fear of failure, or even as Chris Hamill and I have talked extensively about, fear of success. That can be performance related or not. There's kind of a new buzzword or buzz phrase describing something called imposter syndrome nowadays. And imposter syndrome can be defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud, disproportionately affecting high achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. And many question if they're even deserving, or if they, could even take accolades for their achievements. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. This can branch out into kind of deeper into our own self-esteem, poor self-image. And certainly also, there are the cases where certain people have medical reasons for having some of this, like documented depression or an anxiety disorder, or even ADHD can affect these things and affect your ability to stay focused and to not get yourself into that world of peril. What we're going to do as panelists is kind of go around the horn here, and I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves and then talk a little bit about their own frustrations with self-doubt and how that may or may not have presented itself in their experience, and perhaps even starting what they have done or what they have used as strategies for combating that, again, in performance, in their careers, etc. So whoever would like to begin can begin. Okay, Jeff, thanks for volunteering. Jeff Curtin, everyone.
I was just hoping somebody else would guinea pig first, and then I could know what not to say. So, okay. So yeah, my name's Jeff Curtin. I live in Kansas City right now. I had studied with Dr. Sievers at Oklahoma. Did bachelor's and master's there, and did doctoral studies up here at UMKC. So, um, I think for me, all this kind of stuff sort of, I've sort of had battled anxiety stuff much of my life. And I think maybe some of that stuff for me comes back to, I guess, maybe some self-image stuff, things like that. And, I guess throughout the next hour and a half, we can go into how we've addressed that. But I've always, you know, it's weird because people that know me, I know I joke around a lot, but part of the reason I joke around a lot is because I'm so serious, and I have to joke around, or I'd sort of blow my top. So just in studying with Dr. Sievers, and a handful of lessons with Mr. Adam, maybe 10 or 15, um, really helped me understand how to address certain things in my own person, how to not just work on my trumpet playing, but work on my person, myself. So I won't necessarily get into the specifics of that now, but it's been very helpful for me over the years, just having studied with both of them.
Anyone? Bueller?
Rusty.
And I'll go. This is my name's Chris Hamill, as you can see on the thing there. Yeah, I studied with Dr. Sievers quite a while ago when he was in Ohio, and then finished up with him when he was at the University of Oklahoma. Jeff and I both followed him from Ohio to Oklahoma. But while at OU, I landed a gig in the Air Force, and I just hit my 20-year anniversary last Saturday, which is cool and scary and weird all in the same thing. But my point of bringing up the military is that during that gig of 20 years or so, I was pretty confident in abilities and skills and all of that. But the last 2 years or so, some things have kind of crept into my playing. And, then like what Martin mentioned at the beginning, all of these self-doubt and questioning yourself kind of kicked in. And then what also Martin mentioned was that like when you get the gig, like, okay, great, now what? Like what do we do from here? And worrying about moving forward. So yeah, we'll get into, I think, how we've dealt with these individually as we go. But that's kind of why I'm here. Is just the last couple of years, those struggles and tensions and such have crept into my playing.
Let's get this over with. Hi, I'm Rusty Smith. I am located in North Carolina. I was a student of Joe Phelps, who was a great Adam student and great teacher at Appalachian State back in the days when you could afford to go to school for 5 years. So I did. And every semester at least, Joe would pile 3 or 4 of us in his car and drive us up to Bloomington for lessons with Mr. Adam. And then after I graduated, I was fortunate enough to get to study with Mr. Adam at IU for 2 years. The last 2 years he taught on the faculty there. And quite honestly, I was Captain Fearless back then, I guess. Except for talking to girls, I was pretty cool. Couldn't really do that, but I didn't worry about playing my horn. I didn't, I had this community support system around me of like-minded trumpet players, individuals, we were all getting after it, but we're also like cheering for each other, and it was pretty awesome. And then, I left school and decided to go out. I was released into the wild and moved to Nashville and worked there for a little while, but kind of got away from trumpet playing for a bit just because of a lack of work. And then got back into the trumpet playing thing. I mean, I worked as a bouncer and a stagehand and all this weird stuff that wasn't very trumpet-like. But then landed a gig on a Broadway show and came back to North Carolina and went to work on my master's. And did not have that support system. Suddenly I'm about 30 years old and in a new program with a lot of folks that are 10 years younger than me that are looking at me like I'm supposed to be the guy. And I'm like, oh no, I'm here to try to recapture a little of the glory days. And that kind of stuck with me for a while. So I've really kind of struggled with I'm so happy that we have this community that we can talk about things like this now. And, so I'm going to shut up and let somebody else talk now. What? Fred?
Lacey, Fred?
Go. I'll go.
Jump right in there.
I think I come at things from, I didn't know whether to start at the end and work back or start at the beginning and work forward. But I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to tell me that putting myself in uncomfortable situations and stretching myself, that's how you got better at something. And then one of my mentors later on always told me to surround myself with people that were better at a particular activity, whether it was chess or basketball or trumpet or whatever it happened to be. And you would play up to that level. And I think both of those approaches have merit and they worked. But later on, I kind of figured out that both of those tactics kind of put you in a position of inferiority a lot of the time. So you get accustomed to being in that position and having to play up to that level. And me being a competitive sort, I was, as I think Wayne Dixon was talking about earlier, I was driven that I was going to win, whether I was competing against other people or if I was competing against myself, wanting to be better at something. I can remember basketball was one of my big passions before I stopped growing. And when at night, when I would finish practicing, I would challenge myself to how many free throws I could make before I quit. And I'd have to make so many in a row and that type of thing. And if I missed one, I'd have to start over. So I've done that same type of thing with trumpet and in other walks of life. But I think sometimes that at some point I reached a ceiling with being able to attain some of the things that I wanted to attain. And I think when I went to grad school, especially, was kind of a line in the sand for me. I didn't enjoy performing at that point. I was a good trumpet player, except when I had to perform, and it was frustrating to a degree that I was at the point where I was ready to either figure this out or I was going to do something else for a living. And so that was my, I guess that's my jumping off place for the discussion, and then some of the things that happened after that point, and then when I got hooked up with Mr. Adam just after that.
Lacey, rock, paper, scissors, or it's you?
I wanted to make sure to wait to unmute until I was supposed to. So hi, I'm Lacey Phelps. Nice to meet you guys. Hi, Rusty. And hi, Fred. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Chris. Martin, thanks for asking me to do this. Rob, Mike, thanks for putting all this together. Chris, good to see you. Well, when Martin first asked me about being on this panel, I had to go look up imposter syndrome. And, I think for me, the biggest thing is the first half of life. I was upset if someone didn't like me or if they didn't like me as much as I like them, because I'm the kind of person that would do anything for anybody, no matter how they treat me. And I can't ever understand why people won't return that favor, whether it's in trumpet playing or, at the grocery store or whatever. So what I have learned and what I hope that I can contribute later in the conversation is what I do with my students, how I've adapted the way that I teach from how I learned from Carl Sievers. Was Carl Sievers ever unsure that I could do something on the trumpet? Never, not once. He knew I could do it. And so therefore I started to believe that I could do it. And I think that goes back to what Fred was just saying, who we surround ourselves with is really important. Having nearly died a few years ago, I've really been through a spiritual transformation of being able to let go of, if somebody doesn't like me, then that's okay. And I'm free, and I still get to be really nice to everybody, and it's fine. And how I play trumpet is directly related to how I feel about me and my self-image. And I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned from being a student of Mr. Adam and Dr. Sievers. That can really be shaped by how they think of us. But ultimately, no matter what Carl Sievers thinks of me, even though I very much, I'm concerned with that to a certain degree in life every day, but no matter what he thinks of me, I am the only one that has to live with me. I am the only one that has to get up with me every day. I'm the only one that has to go to sleep with me every night. I'm the only one that has to eat with me every meal. And, I like me, and it's okay if somebody else doesn't. And I learned a lot of that from Jeff Curtin too, hanging out with Jeff Curtin. I feel sure that Jeff really likes himself. There he goes. So, being around really healthy people. And if I asked Jeff, do you think I could play this piece on trumpet? I don't have to ask Jeff. Jeff would say yes before I even said the name of the piece, because he's a good guy, and he's sure of himself to the point that he can be sure of me. So I think to pass on Mr. Adams' legacy of things, we would serve ourselves and those around us well to first of all believe in ourselves and learn how to move. This is a great topic, Martin, and how to move all this to the side so that we can build one another up. And how we look at ourselves directly correlates with how we treat others, and treating others well helps them, and that's our job. So I don't know, I'm really glad to be here, and I don't have all the answers, but I'm really honored that Martin asked me to join in. And I'm starting to understand a lot of things about how and why I teach a certain way because of being invited into this panel. So I look forward to sharing that.
Great. Thank you, Lacey. I'm the one who started all this mess, I suppose. So I'll tell a little bit about me and my thinking in pondering some of these issues. Stage fright, I think, is probably something that everybody has experienced in one way or another. I'm not exempt from that. But I think for me personally, a bigger challenge has been not so much going through the prep of performing, doing the performing itself, taking the audition, those kind of things. It was after that. And honestly, a lot of it came for me from listening, the countless hours that we listened to recordings of these great individuals, and just wondering, how in the world can I ever measure up to that? How in the world can I ever measure up to listening to Greg Wing play? Holy cow, is that something? And you're also in lessons. I took some lessons from Mr. Adam. I was certainly in a boatload of lessons with Dr. Sievers. And, when you're in lessons with Dr. Sievers and he's missed, let's see, I've known him since 1988. And I think I've heard him miss 3 notes the entire time. So there's a little bit of pressure undue pressure that I put on myself, but pressure nonetheless, both in my playing and also in my teaching. And, this kind of goes, I don't know if it's my personality or what. I'm always that guy that if there's an emergency and something's going on that's bad, I can be cool as cucumber during the emergency. About 15 minutes after the emergency, I'm a complete mess. Like, I just fall apart. Like, well, what if this happened? Well, what if this happened? And so anyway, I guess I'm kind of the poster child for some of these things. And when I saw the thing about imposter syndrome, where I first saw that introduced for me, I believe it was an Under Armour commercial. And it was an athlete in the WNBA, and she was talking about, and apparently I don't watch WNBA, and I'm sorry if I have hashtag offended anybody by not doing that, but at any rate, I really didn't know her, but she's apparently one of the best athletes in that league, and she was talking about all these things that she, every time she'd see a film of herself, all she saw was the 5% that didn't go well, that she could have improved on, that she didn't do. And then she said at one point she started kind of thinking about this thing and, well, wait a minute, there's a whole 95% that's going really well. And that's the whole reason that she's there doing what she's doing, So I think a lot of those things for me is about perspective. And it's about the perspective of, it's sort of what Lacey was just saying. How can I be the best me and also not constantly compare myself with others? I really like the game of golf because most of the time golf is me against me. Occasionally I have some fuzzy math, I'll admit, but golf is just such an individual thing, and I really enjoy that. I've played team sports, but I've kind of always been that way too. I was in wrestling, I was in all these individual things, but all of those things coupled with, and I don't mind saying this publicly, for me, I've also dealt with some documented anxiety issues. And so that was another hurdle that I had to get over, that anytime it seemed like I was having some kind of an issue, it was exploded even further because I was down on myself, but then I was also struggling with the other feelings of anxiety. And gosh, turn on the, if you want to experience say anxiety, turn on the evening news. I mean, for heaven's sake, it's, you know, we live in a weird world right now. So at any rate, that's kind of a little bit about me and what drew me to wanting to talk about this. Of course, everybody has their accounts of how Mr. Adam's wisdom might have helped them through some of these things and to work through them. And most of us, even when we've gotten in that place mentally for whatever reason, have been able to, you know, work ourselves back out or work on it and have strategies for doing so. I think first, if he doesn't mind talking about this, I would like Rusty to talk a little bit about his experience, because he has had some issues that, you know, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Rusty, but he's had some issues that are interesting, lending themselves to this conversation. And certainly he's got his head in the right place in working through those things.
Well, basically, don't give yourself the option of quitting. It was kind of my thing. It's like, okay, I got to do this, and just come on in, boys. The water's fine. You know, when I went out on this Broadway show tour, after about 2 weeks of being on the road, we were in Louisville, Kentucky, of all places, and I had this meltdown, this chops meltdown, and completely freaking out. And but we're in Louisville, so I had a Sunday morning off, and Mr. Adam was good enough to see me that morning. I rented a car, hauled up to Bloomington, went to see Mr. Adam. 30 seconds later, I was like, why did I even have to come up here? You know, just hearing that voice kind of put me back in that place again. But you know, and then you get away from it, and you get around folks who are kind of a little bit different. You know, my performance anxiety was always kind of selective. I played in Las Vegas a lot with the Four Tops, never had a problem. Did television shows, never had a problem. Played with this band out of Nashville for 100,000 people one time, no problem. Go to my mom and dad's church to stand up and play Come to Jesus in whole notes, and I'm shaking like a Mexican space shuttle. It was terrible. It was just awful. Sorry, that might have been a little off color, but you know, it was just the worst thing in the world. And I'm becoming, there's this inner voice, this chatter that's going on, and it's like keeping score of what you do well, but mostly what you don't do so well. And yeah, I think I've gotten past a lot of that stuff, but going back, okay, so this is a tale of woe and shattered dreams, y'all. I finished my master's degree. I got a gig playing a theater show I worked for a country artist for about 15 years, and I had a full-time employment for 9 of those years playing a theater show where I was the only trumpet player in the building. And they didn't really understand what it means to be a trumpet player. So it was like I was forbidden from warming up in the building and had to be there for an hour before the show. And the first thing people are going to hear is this high note at the beginning of the show being shot like a gun. And some things kind of developed in my playing that were kind of weird, but never ever did it happen on the gig. It was always in the practice. But then, you know, and then the theater closed and I had some health issues. Oh, the other thing I developed, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. But the other thing I kind of developed was, I don't know, those of you who don't know me, I'm essentially Sasquatch's twin brother with a little bit less hair. I'm got I'm a pretty good sized fella. And here I am on stage, center stage with these Olympic caliber athletes, singer, dancers, and stuff. And I'm a foot and a half taller than most of the people I'm around on the stage. So guess what? I stick out like a pork chop in a synagogue. I'm doing all of these ethnic things I should not say on the social media. Anyway, it's I started to develop these body image issues, which turn into performance anxiety issues. Again, it never happens on the gig. Sorry, I got to stop reading the chat. It stops happening on that never happens on the gig, but the self-talk stuff gets louder. Well, the theater closes. I have kidney failure. I have to have a kidney transplant. And so then I have, 41 staples in my belly. I have to learn how to play the trumpet again and figure all of that out. Oh yeah, the first gig back is playing I worked at a karaoke company too, and I had to play Earth, Wind, and Fire stuff. First gig back, terrifying. Went fine, as far as I know. Not really a problem. But I moved back to North Carolina, and that's when I start teaching and stuff like that. And in the first few years of teaching, you're really kind of trying to figure out how to do it, and you think you can just jump in there and do the Mr. Adam thing, but if there's a different kind of culture there, it became challenging, and because not everybody saw things that way. I'm rambling again. Anyway, get back to playing again, freelancing. Things are cool. Year and a half later, I have to have both of my native kidneys removed. So when you get a transplant, they don't take anything out. You just get extra equipment thrown up under the hood. So they pop out the two twins. They were huge. They were like 30 pounds of kidney. You're supposed to have like two. And so have to figure out how to play again. And then I get the bright idea of going back to school to get my doctorate at age 50. So the whole thing about being in a master's program where you're 10 years older than the students in the class, suddenly you're in a program where you're 10 years older than the students in the program's parents. Yeah, big fun. So and again, I never had real problems performing in an ensemble, but standing up to play my recitals was pretty terrifying. Body tremors, all of that stuff, just really having a hard time calming down over all of that stuff. And now I don't think I really have those issues. I've kind of come to terms with a lot of things. I got married, and so that's a big calming influence and everything. However, the fear that it's going to come back is really kind of a drag.
Hey, so Rusty, can I ask, was there anything from studying with Mr. Adam that helped you with that? Like anything he said or taught you, or somebody else in our group that helped you with that?
For a long time, I feel like I was trying to be, I'm in the people pleasing business. And so I was always trying to be what someone else thought I was supposed to be. But, you really can only be who you are and be, the best Jeff. You can be the best Jeff you can ever be, and that's awesome. And Mr. Adam always kind of emphasized, as I recall, from his Monday night sessions with us, get up there and be the best people you can be. And when I kind of made up my mind that I was just going to be me and take it or leave it, things got better. Talk about being an imposter. I mean, would anybody try to be like this? No. So once I let all of that go, and there's the feeling sorry for yourself thing, the biggest sin in the world, which I know Martin's gonna play a little audio clip of Mr. Adam here in a little while that kind of brings some of that into, and those two things really helped me tremendously, those two concepts.
Hey Russ, real quick, this is Chris. Going back to your situation in Louisville and when you went to see Mr. Adam, and I know you jokingly 30 seconds later all of those things were gone. I probably know why, but can you maybe explain to some folks? I'm looking on the chat. We got 55 people here. Maybe there are folks who, can we get inside that room a little bit? Like, how did they do that with you so quickly? I mean,
You
some
know,
of us are laughing as we know, but yeah,
one
that'd be
one
great.
of the things we're always trying to do is develop, as Carl pointed out earlier, that kinesthetic response, that reflexive way of playing. And as soon as I heard, "Well, God, where'd you get those shoes?" or whatever it is that he happened to say that time, and pick up his horn and said, "Well, I'll play one, you play one." And we played about 3 long tones, and he was like, "Well, what's your problem?" Because you just fall back into that model. And so I couldn't tell you exactly what he did. He's a wizard, but he was brilliant at that whole psychological game, and you it really kind of saved my tour right there.
If I can jump in, just in my few lessons I had with Mr. Adam, and I put this in our notes the other night. He had said something to me, and talking with other people, I know he said this to a lot of people, that no one can offer the world what you can on the trumpet. And it's, that's an easy thing, I think, with how Mr. Adams' personality was, to just dismiss that as him saying something nice to you, just to be friendly, or kind of like a go get 'em slugger kind of thing. But it was, for me, like, when I can really grasp a hold of that, internalize that, and let that influence my self-image, that makes my playing better. That kind of helps take care of some of this anxiety or stage fright or imposter stuff. And I feel like, Mr. Adams' teaching was, at least for me, like a two-pronged thing, or at least two prongs, or maybe several prongs, but at least two. So he's addressing, your skills on the trumpet, right? But also the self-image. So when he's saying that stuff, that nobody can offer what I can offer on the trumpet, I'm maybe I'm not Jerry Hay or Maurice Andre, but on the flip side, they're not me, and I have a unique thing I can offer the trumpet world, either as a player or a teacher or whatever. And if I can really internalize that, let that be part of who I am as a player and a teacher, then that, for me at least, that helps remedy some of this this anxiety stuff that I deal with. Like these things of not being good enough, or not, no, you didn't do it when you should have done it, kind of stuff. That's really been helpful for me, to go back and just reflect on that, help that really kind of sink into who I am as a player. And of course, and Dr. Sievers has helped with that too. You talk about the kinesthetic response, and Rusty, you going to hear Mr. Adam, or going to have a lesson with him. It's been the same thing for me, going back and having a lesson with Dr. Sievers. Just to hear his delivery of the sound, to hear how his sound sings when he plays, that automatically gets me into a good place. So it's the self-image, and then it's hearing somebody that can feed that thing in your brain, that gets you into, like in Happy Gilmore, gets you into your happy place, and gets you where you've got all that other stuff sort of out the door, and you're not focused on the obstacles anymore. You're just kind of zoned back in on the sound. So for me, that's one of the things that's been helpful for me to clear my head and get focused on what I need to.
Jeff, I wanted to throw in that when you were asking Rusty a while ago about, what is it that he maybe said that helped you, or whatever your initial question was. One thing that I always tell my students that Carl Sievers told me, and that I go back to a lot, is, I used to say, but Dr. Sievers, it feels so awful. And he would always say, it doesn't matter how it feels, it matters how it sounds. So play where it sounds good, do that a little bit, and then it's going to feel good.
Mhm.
And there's more truth to that than that's very helpful to me over and over because you put a piece of metal anywhere on your body, just set your mouthpiece on your hand, just touch the metal to your hand and then move it. There's going to be a little ring where you're circulate. I always show my students, like I just put my mouthpiece on my hand and then pull it off. And you can see from where just the weight of the mouthpiece sitting there, not pushing on it, just sitting there. When you move, there's, it's white underneath. So there's no blood flowing through there. Well, not to like go too much into the physical stuff, but then that, your body realizes there's something going on there and I need to rush blood there. So then our mouth gets puffy just from playing, just from our mouthpiece sitting on our face. And then maybe it doesn't feel good. But if you can just remember to don't worry about how it feels, worry about how it sounds. That was something that was really transformational for me and helps my students also. Kind of a little bit of a rabbit hole, but when you were asking a while ago, I wanted to make sure I threw that in because it helped me so much. It helps my students also.
And I think it's important to remember too, as much as trumpet playing is a process, this developing and the self-image and these are a process too. So you don't, I don't know that you necessarily go from maybe struggling with this stuff, then, the next day you got no issues. It's a process. And I think that's kind of what's so great about this community is, Adam students and, second generation and people that studied with them and this, and it's, we can all kind of lean on each other sort of thing. And it's, we can work on those self-image things together. And it's like, I was reading through Psycho-Cybernetics again the other night. It was the first time I'd read through it. And I mean, since Bill Clinton was president, probably it's been a while, and, in reading through that, just the ideas of self-image and how a perception, like Mr. Adam would say, it's only a thought away. And that perception of sound or that perception, just a little tweak can change everything. And that's what's so great about this. It's like when you get a little bit askew, or things go a little bit awry, feed that positive stimulus in there. If I'm having issues, I've gone through some really weird issues in the last year with getting my teeth done, and it's been kind of a nightmare, frankly. But when I'm listening to Maurice Andre play, and then I try to imitate that, for whatever reason, things seem to go better. And it's like, are my teeth in a different spot? No, it's like, it's, there's just a little bit of a perception change can be a huge difference. And just as it can be a difference in our trumpet playing, it can be a difference in our self-image if we'll kind of dare to let it happen, and I think that's what, Mr. Adam, he was all in 100%. And the same thing with Dr. Sievers, like Lacey was saying, he would, I don't know that if he did doubt it, he never seemed to have any doubt about what I could do on the trumpet. And I joked about this at the Adam thing a few years ago. It's like, I don't know if he was confident in me or if it's just he has such a big ego that he felt like he could get anybody there. But, either way, it's good to have that third party thing speaking into your life with total confidence. So sorry, I know I'm kind of, as Rusty said, kind of rambling here, but
You're good.
all
Fred,
good.
do you want to throw in on some of this?
I just wanted to relate something that happened in one of my lessons with Mr. Adam to what Rusty was talking about earlier, and it has everything to do with the approach to something. But it was probably only my third or fourth lesson with Mr. Adam, and right before the lesson, I had been asked to. He didn't know this, but I had been asked by my alma mater to play on an alumni function, and I would be playing in front of a little over 7,000 people solo. And so we were in the lesson, and we had been doing pipe and blowing for a while, and he just, felt like we needed to take one of the breaks. And he said in the break, he said, so, what's coming up? What are you getting excited about? What do you got coming up? And so I told him what I just said about, getting asked to, to play to sing, and hit the first thing, he didn't even hesitate at first. Oh man, you can really get fired up for that. You can really get excited about that. And it was just such a different approach to how, we normally, oh no, that was not his thing at all. It was, oh man, that's why we do this stuff. That's what you do. That's, and if not, I mean, what he was telling me in a nice way was, man, you get fired up about that. That's why we do this stuff. If not, do something else. That's what I took from it. But it was just that immediate response from him. That's the way he looked at it. It was a great thing. It was a positive thing. And that was the way he wanted to look at everything. But that was kind of a turning point for me. And I played well and I actually made the recording. So, but I've never forgotten that moment.
Awesome. What an opportunity.
I'm sorry, Martin.
Oh, no, you're good.
I was going to say, Mr. Adam was a amazing force of positive energy. I remember he told me one time, he says, remember, you can't not do something. You can only do something.
Right.
And he just had this amazing way. I don't remember him ever giving any kind of harsh, negative kind of words. They were always kind of encouraging, helpful, positive, never introducing the idea that you couldn't do something. So, while I was in school with him, I don't know, I guess that voice always kind of reached me that way. I was one of these guys that went in for my lessons and Mr. Adam would say, well, gosh, let's do this thing. And I would say, okay. And just do it and not ask questions. And I was fortunate enough to have a good enough ear that I never wrote anything down, or, I never really remember learning routine. I never remember struggling to learn routine. It was just like, okay, I'll just do what you do, and bam. And it just always worked. And it always served me well in the things that I was doing while I was, there at IU, and it worked, while I was in undergrad school at App State too. So, that positivity, that never had an inkling of a thought that I couldn't do this until I got released into the wild.
Yeah.
Well, I am sure that some of those successes that we've had has to do with times when we were able to dismiss or divorce ourselves from those feelings of angst. And also, something we've all talked about as followers of the way Mr. Adam taught was about quieting our minds and, getting away from those thoughts. Byron Stripling often calls those things monkeys in your mind. And so, there's constant battle, or, key of F sharp, or whatever, whatever you're uptight about. But, that also, I think, is the whole or part of the reason, sort of a psychological reason for the term, getting your mind in that sound and staying in that sound. Yes, it's about the musical connotation, but it's also about the psychological state of mind for getting yourself into that place and staying there. And I'm going to tell a little story about Dr. Sievers that he probably doesn't even remember, but it was very impactful for me. When I was in the service, I used to be in the Air Force band, like Chris is, a trumpeter, and was at Offutt Air Force Base. And I'm sure Chris can attest, when you're in a mixed group like that with several other trumpeters and everybody kind of comes from different backgrounds, there's a lot of influence and certainly chatter about, well, I learned this way and I did it this way. And sometimes it was just name your, I don't know, everything from standing on your head to, buzzing the mouthpiece for 12 hours or whatever, whatever the thing was, it didn't matter. And so I would listen to a lot of those things and kind of get every now and then, curious, well, gosh, why does that work for that guy? And suddenly my head would totally be out of what I would normally do. That distraction was enough to go, okay, well, I'm going to, so in other words, where was my concentration? And where was my focus? It certainly wasn't on playing with the best sound I could, because I was trying to figure out, kind of like pieces of a puzzle, what was going with these other guys. And so one time I had dug myself into a pretty good hole by thinking that sort of abstract way. And as would often happen at that point, I would call Dr. Sievers and he would kind of talk me off the ledge, and I'd go, oh yeah, okay, now I'm kind of getting straightened out. I'd come back into all that. And so one time I would just really had got myself boogered up. And so I called Dr. Sievers, and he says, well, I think you really need to call Mr. Adam on this one. And I was like, oh, really? Like, oh gosh, I really must be screwed up, man. He's like, he's sending me down the line, I'm like, oh man, okay, great. So nervously, I called Mr. Adam, and Mr. Adam goes, well, of course, I can't be there to hear your play, and I don't really know what's going on with you, but I'm pretty sure I'd probably be telling you the same thing, and that's get your head out of your ass and put it back in that sound, and you'll be just fine. And I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, I have heard that so many times. Okay, I get it. Now Mr. Adams telling me this. So I hang up. I said, thank you very much. I hang up. I call back Dr. Sievers. What did he say? I said, well, he told me to get my rear end out of my, get my head out of my rear end and get back in the sound. And Carl goes, thus endeth the lesson. Click.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I get it, But even though we know these things, sometimes being able to stay in that state can be more difficult at times than other times. So I guess I'd like to ask the rest of the panel, what has worked for you in terms of both getting yourselves out of trouble, with some of the things we've already been talking about, but also getting yourself back to that calm, peaceful state, that place where we are trying to have that absolutely pure thought and stay in that place. Because for me, maybe it's just my personality too. I'm like bright, shiny thing, that's just me, and I'm immediately, whoa. And so staying inside that has been proven very difficult for me and something that I have to constantly work on. But are there other guys that, what has worked for you either in your playing or your teaching or whatever to help you stay in that place?
I definitely fall in the pretty thing category too. But when you're on a live performance and something isn't right, or there's a major distraction, or I can think of more than one time in live theater performances where things go really wrong, like really wrong. And whenever you are aware of something else, but you have to be ever so present in what I have learned is that whenever chaos ensues, or there's something uncomfortable or something foreign going on while the horn is in my hand, I have to get calm and get more calm. And the crazier things get, the more zoned in I have to I just have to go to this other world. It's kind of like not even being in reality. I don't know how to describe it, but the alternative can be a disaster. And I don't want to sound bad on a live gig, so for whatever that's worth, whenever those things have happened over, and you get better at it every time it happens, or if there's something really uncomfortable, like one time a conductor was yelling at the contractor at a gig. Thank God I was not the contractor that day, but a guy had flown into Dallas from Europe, and he was conducting something, and somebody on saxophone didn't have the right music, and he was hearing something that should be at measure 73, and he started yelling at the saxophone player, why aren't you playing? And the saxophone, he's one of the very best saxophone players in the world, arguably. And Randy Lee said, I don't have that in my part. Well, the conductor just became a complete tyrant. And I noticed that the contractor sat back in their chair and put their arms like this, and then looked down at the ground and got more and more calm. And I took a cue from that. And I mean, that was, I had already started learning that that's what you do, but to see that contractor that I respected so much react that way, there wasn't anything to do except get calm and calm and calm. Getting upset and having a fit wasn't going to help anything. So if you can just stay calm and not have a fit when the horn's in your hand and you have to produce or do whatever you have to do at that moment. And you have to always be flexible on those live things. If you're able to do that, I think that's a big reflection of self-control. And I think that's a big reflection of, it all goes back to the self-image. You know, if you don't have that positive image of yourself that you can handle anything. I don't know of any live performance where something could go horrifically wrong, other than the building being on fire. I don't know what could go wrong that I couldn't just sit there and make it work. That's a pretty big statement, you know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe tomorrow I'll fall off the stage and have a disaster, but I don't think so. And I think that's pretty cool, you know, to be able to say that. And you can too, Martin, and you can too, Jeff and Fred. You would do the same thing, and Rob and Rusty, and you guys would all do the same thing. I'd be shocked if you didn't. And Chris, how many war zones have you been in, you know, when you're performing for people? So nothing's going to get you, you know. So I think it all goes back to, how do I handle everything? I handle everything from how I talk to other people to how I handle what goes into my horn and comes out. It all goes back to my self-image, and it's good stuff. I can't wait to hear that, the clip that you're going to play for us, Martin, but I'm going to go back to muting myself.
Sure. Maybe this would be a good time for that break. Rob, would you help us? This is Mr. Adam. We thought it would be kind of cool to actually hear something straight from Mr. Adam. This is a recording of him talking about the Lord's Prayer, not so much in a religious context, but in a very practical sense, and kind of how it helps us with being who we ought to be, and not being too certainly not feeling sorry for ourselves. We'll say that.
You know, I always like to talk about the Lord's Prayer a little bit. This isn't going to be in a very religious way, of course, but I think that from what my father used to tell me, when he was kind of an interesting guy, he played fiddle and was pretty successful at it, and had to move to Colorado because of his health. And he had no desires for me to play the trumpet, but I had the desire to do it, so that's how that worked out. But he always explained the Lord's Prayer to us like this: Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And what does that mean to you?
It's a holy name.
All right, it's very respectfully, and that's right, and it's holy. All right. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It doesn't say anything about you going to heaven, does it? But it says, all you stinkers get in line, because we're going to do it right down here like we want to do it up there. Why wait? So let's do it right here. So all you guys get in line. Right. Give us this day our daily bread. We have today, and only today. None of you know whether you're going to be up tomorrow morning. I don't even know whether I'm going to be up tomorrow. Yesterday is gone, so you don't have to worry about that. So actually all you have to do is worry about today, don't you? And you know, my dad used to say, you can take a day off, bud, but you can't put it back. And so we have to get at what we're going to do just for today, okay? Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors is a kind of an interesting one. And if you think about it just a little bit, you have to come up with the idea that maybe if we take a slice at our neighbor, maybe we're taking a slice out of our own life. And this creates tension within us. So you don't criticize anybody because of protection for yourself. That's a selfish way of looking at it. It's just like the guy that says, well, you know, you want to make friends of everybody because sometime you're going to want to use them, right? Well, you want to make friends with yourself so that, by George, you're not involved in this tension activity, because that's what destroys us. So forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So if you can't forgive your fellow man any of his trespasses, then you're not able to forgive yourself. So you're going to treat yourself just the best that you can possibly do, because you want to get yourself in some kind of a working order so that you can make this possible, this music business possible. All right? Now I got to go back and repeat this prayer in my mind, you know, where in the world I am here. Lead us not to temptation, right? But deliver us from evil. hey, what's the big sin in the world?
Feeling sorry for yourself.
You are right. That's right. Feeling sorry for yourself. I don't know where you got that answer, but boy, that's a right one. Okay. So you don't want to feel sorry for yourself, because when you start feeling sorry for yourself, this is where all the tensions arrive. Hate comes from out of that because you feel sorry for yourself. All right, when you're a little kid, she's got a toy that you'd like to have and you don't have one. Well, what's the little kid do? He's feeling sorry for himself, right? So he goes yelling to Mama, and of course Mama has to go down and buy the same little toy. Now, if that were a different little toy, and the little girl had a better toy than this little girl, but the other little girl made her situation so that she felt that her toy was better than his, the good toy wouldn't be good enough, see? So what we have to do is we have to watch that, don't we? That, you bet your life. So feeling sorry for yourself creates jealousy. It creates hatred. It creates all these things that cause all our troubles. And all our troubles are caused by this tension factor that we get into when we perform. Now, I can't tell you how great this tension factor is, because tension is a destroyer of concentration, too. Now, when you're worried about what your fellow man's saying about you, then there's tension sets in. And the only way you can concentrate is through a peaceful mind. You have to have a very peaceful mind to make this thing work. And of course, the most important part of the Lord's Prayer is, for thine is the kingdom, thine is the power, and thine is the glory. Let's take it out of a really religious context here and put it in a very rational sort of way. And what would we say thine is? Do you know what thine is? Your what?
The way your world, the way you're seeing.
I'm goofing up here.
The way thine will be done. Just through your mind.
Your mind. Thine is the kingdom. Your mind is where you exist. And you don't exist anyplace else but there. So thine is the kingdom. Your mind is your kingdom. Thine is your power. Your mind is your strength. And thine is the glory. And thine being your happiness. So my father would say, all you stinkers, get your attitude jacked up and let's get going with this thing. Let's join the world. Let's get this thing ourselves in some cooperative way in which we can make this work for us. And of course, if you love yourself, then your fellow man love you. And then you don't have all these outside pressures on, I got to do this way and that way and the other things.
Thanks, Rob.
Good stuff.
That's freaking awesome.
Absolutely. So does anybody have anything else to say? I mean, he certainly, there's a lot in that recording. But, you know, one of the things that occurs to me is that, you know, keeping that peaceful, quiet mind thing we were just talking about, but also being very secure in who you are and being very careful not to, as it was stated before, put out someone else's light to make yours shine brighter.
Well, and you know, I think it's important to remember it's a decision we make. And like you know, we're saying the other day, it's like Mr. Adam would say, and I remember Dr. Seaver saying this, you know, science tells us we can only concentrate on one thing at a time, right? So we can either have our mind 100% in a beautiful sound, or we can worry what Fred thinks about us or Rusty. You know what I mean? And you're not going to do both. So, you know, so as much as you're gonna work on the trumpet skills and record yourself and, you know, try to get everything just so you're gonna work on the self-image. So it's like, how do we fix it? You know, how do we get ourselves free? You know, because people talk about studying with Mr. Adam, like he freed them. He freed their mind, you know, and that's, you know, if you listen to the Lord's Prayer, that's where it all starts and stops, is in your mind. You know, what do you allow into it? What do you allow yourself to focus on? What do you allow, good or bad? What do you allow yourself to focus on? And then you build on that. And it's like, I thought of this thing like, you know, when a ship is on course if it gets a little off course, you don't notice it at first, so you get into being anxious or thinking about your chops or whatever, rather than a beautiful sound, and you'll get a little off course. And then eventually you notice you're way off here in no man's land, and you've like got to rechart rather than just staying focused on it the whole time. I know it's kind of not a perfect analogy, but it's what you decide to focus on and what you decide to cultivate daily, and then that's manifested in your performance.
Great.
This was kind of another turning point for me in this area. There's a lot of discussion when we're talking about Mr. Adam and Adam people in general about being a good person and that type of person. And there were two things that I had discussed with Mr. Adam that came up in lessons as a matter of passing. But one of my philosophies that we were talking about in the lesson one day, and it wasn't related to music, it was related to something else, but then it ended up being related to playing. And that was that you believe that you are being treated like you treat other people. So there were two areas very specific for me, one of which was I realized that I was a more nervous performer because I wasn't being a good listener at that time. And to just break it down into its simplest terms, I was sitting in a recital waiting for somebody to miss a note. And I would use the word got convicted of that because that was a wrong way to be. And then I realized, as Mr. Adam was talking about, that it was affecting me as a performer because I wasn't the right kind of listener. And there was an old saying that the best followers make the best leaders. And when you put yourself in that position and remember what those things were like, then the other part was being a good colleague, because I believe somebody mentioned in our meeting the other night about being on a gig where somebody was actually purposely trying to make it difficult for you. And we've all encountered people like that. I don't think I've ever been that person on a gig. In fact, when somebody showed up at a gig, I was trying to help them because I was more about the big picture of making the gig as good as it could be for everybody, and not simply, proving what I was or what I wasn't. So I think that being a good person, good listener, good colleague, as Lacey was saying earlier in her remarks, that has everything to do with how we think people are perceiving us when we're on stage. And that was a big thing that I dealt with Mr. Adam pretty early on as well.
And I believe also in our discussion, and we obviously met and talked through things a couple of evenings ago to make sure we were kind of hitting on the same ideas and points. But I believe it was Rusty was talking about the importance of having that positive environment. And, my teacher, Mr. Adam, Dr. Sievers, several of us who are teaching, try our best to create that kind of environment. And it's not just because we want everybody to like each other, it's because, we need to be good people, but at the same time, all of that affects everyone. And, it creates such a comforting environment that we do believe and we do feel like we can, and we can, go past that. And, I know right now, goodness, if I was having a bad time, there's any one of the people in this panel right now, I could call them up right now and boy, we would be there for each other in a heartbeat. There's not even a question about it. But it's that kind of support structure that also, I think, helps us overcome our self-doubts, and certainly just that outlet of being able, when you're going through a downtime, hey, can we rap about this? Can we do some playing, even over the internet? And, during that time, we can come about helping each other. And I just, there's no amount of money that's worth these friendships that we have and this support structure that we have. So I think that's huge.
And I want to jump in there that I recall Dr. Sievers mentioning some of the challenges that Mr. Adam had with other faculty, or that maybe other faculty had with him, and how he addressed that. And so I don't want to put words in Dr. Sievers' mouth or say what Mr. Adam experienced in that regard. But I think anytime I ever heard, those situations where people are not positive around us, Mr. Adam was not immune from that. And I think the overbearing or the repeating story that I heard associated with Mr. Adam was that he's always just pushed it to the side and went forward, whatever that was. And I wish that Carl Sievers was on here right now, or somebody that was at IU enough to give us a couple of examples of when somebody really did him wrong and really tried to go out of their way to bring bad energy in and hurt things. Because the stories that I've heard is he always persevered and didn't give it any attention. And we all have those people, whether we choose to be around them or we have to work with them based on where we are working or whatever our situation is. And I think it's really important to learn from that, because then it allows us to be free, and it allows us to keep our sanity, and we get to keep loving us, and then we get to pass that forward. So anyway.
So Rob, did we have any questions that have come across the Facebook feed?
Not yet. I've put the call out, and if anybody has any, I will pass them along.
Sure.
Hey, Rob, one just came in from Julia Burney. I don't know if
that's correct. That's one of my students.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Chris, go ahead and read it.
I'm going to throw her under the bus then, Martin. No, I'm just kidding. So
Go
she was asking about during this, pandemic time where we're not performing, or on summer breaks like summer, or from the pandemic where I didn't have the opportunity to play live in front of someone. Is there any advice to not backtrack or reset with performance anxiety during these large amounts of time not playing in front of people? So what I'll throw in my little 2 cents here and then pass the baton is, Jeff mentioned something the other night in our chat for this, is your head is either in the sound or it's not. So you could be fly fishing, you could be changing the tires in your car. I mean, so if I had to give her any advice, it was like, get your head back in the sound of where it needs to be. Whether that's pandemic or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's where it needs to be. And that, going back earlier, somebody mentioned, I think it was again Jeff, I'm writing down all these Jeffisms. Like, it is wholeheartedly a choice, to put yourself back into that sound. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but for Julia, is that her name, Martin? Yeah, just commit to getting yourself back into that.
Yeah, and I think also it's, you haven't been doing it for a year and a half. It might take a second. You know what I mean? You might not just roll right back into it and, feel like you did before, and that's okay. Just keep working on what you're working on as far as playing. And, and if need be, if there's a situation that arises where a performance doesn't go particularly well, lean on Martin. He's your teacher, and, be cognizant of, I think, of making sure your image is intact, your self-image, and you're not going down that road of, well, I haven't done this in a long time, and I don't sound good, and I'm not what I used to be, and all that. That's not where you want your head. Even if it may be the truth at the time, maybe you don't sound like you want to sound, and maybe you're not where you're at. Like Rusty said something the other day, you've got to be honest about where you are. Okay, so you're honest about where you are. Maybe the skill is not where you want it to be, but then you keep the positive framework, keep working on it, and get busy getting it where it needs to be. And hopefully, Martin, even though he's a little bit short, he ought to be able to hear those things in your sound and help you out with ways that you can, get to where you need to be.
Love you, Jeff.
And there's another thing we just heard from, with all respect, the horse's mouth. You can take a day off, but you can't put it back. We're all gonna get off the path, but we got to get back on and keep our eyes focused on our goal. And what is it? Obstacles are what we see when we take our eyes off the goal. So
Yeah.
jump in. The water's fine. And I'll tell you this. This is this pandemic has been like the best thing for my playing. I get up every morning and I'm on Zoom with 3 or 4 people. I was very lucky. Dr. Jimmy Stokes at Appalachian State asked me to cover for him last fall. And, hey, I'm a kidney transplant guy. I can't go in. So we did all of our lessons on Zoom, but we also started having, a couple days a week getting together in the morning and blowing routine with one another.
Yeah.
It ain't perfect, but it is what we have to work with. If we get caught up in thinking we have to be in pristine ideal circumstances, do what you can till you get there and get back in.
And Julia, I think too, going back to the thing that I talked about earlier and also expanding on something Jeff said, is just be excited. It's great to get back, and it's going to be a hurt so good thing. And we all know that. We all knew that first gig back was going to hurt, but man, it was going to feel great to hurt that way again. So just look forward to getting back in there and mixing it up and go do it.
Yeah.
There's a John Raymond, a wonderful guy in our community, asked a really good question. He asked, how would you go about addressing issues of self-doubt with students that are younger now, growing up with the influences of social media? There's a lot of trumpet, a lot of music, and a lot of pressures that come with the social media things, and it can really kind of play havoc with the kid's mind. So how would you address that?
I know what I always think, what would Carl Sievers say whenever I try to think of something like that? And I always call him lovingly my Mr. Adam. So he would always, if I was ever wondering this or that, or this person said this about that, what do I do about that? And if I was bothered by something or didn't know which way to go with it, Sievers would look me right in the eye from across the room and go, you know who you are, young lady. And so anytime, I think it's important to read psycho-cybernetics and do some development, of your own self-image and know who you are. And if you're not sure, you got to figure that out. And then you get to filter out all that other stuff. And it's a lot easier to filter through the news and social media and the events of the world and the events in the trumpet world and comparing yourself to others. It's so much easier when you know who you are. And any day that I've struggled, like, oh man, how am I going to get through today? Well, honestly, I mean, I'm not just saying this, thinking about Jeff Curtin, would he have trouble getting through the day? Heck no. I'm Jeff Curtin. Everybody move out and watch out and watch me do this, and the confidence, if you ever struggle with confidence or what's going on with social media or buying into anything, or you're not sure what to think about something, call Jeff. He'll clear it up for you real quick and he'll have a real good reason for it. And, I haven't had to do that a long time, but when I was younger and in my more formative years, Jeff's just a few years older than me, but he's like a whole generation ahead in terms of he's sure of what he thinks and why. And he has very high moral reasons for those things, in my opinion. So I've always really, I mean, he's either got me fooled or he doesn't. I'm pretty sure that he doesn't. So, find out whoever your Jeff Curtin is or call him. His phone number is 405. What's your number, Jeff? Put it out. Okay. So, I just want to throw out there, knowing who you are, that whenever you ask that, Rob, and I've had some students ask me about that, and I heard this on Facebook, or I heard this read this on Instagram, and what do I do about this in my trumpet playing? Well, all that kind of goes back to knowing who you are, knowing what your self-image looks like and making sure that we're doing a good job as their teachers, helping shape that the way that we had it done for us through Mr. Adam and or, our mentors, Carl Sievers or whatever. And don't forget the things that I always go through with my students at the end of the lessons, like, okay, go out there in the world and be good. Don't just be a good trumpet player, be good and be positive and be free. And if you're positive and you're good and you feel good about you here and here, then you get to pass that forward. So and then of course one other thing I want to throw in there before we run out of time is that pie chart that Carl Sievers always has in his office, or he used to have it on a dry erase board or blackboard or whatever. It'd be like a pie chart, and it would have 90%. And in the 90% category, it would say imagination really big. And then in the 9% piece of the pie, it would say breath. And in the 1% piece of the pie, it would say all the other stuff. And what he means by that is practicing your scales and your articulation and all the stuff that we spend all the time doing, that we do routine every day, and making sure we are diligent at it. And the thing, all of our Arbin exercises and our Getchels and our flow studies and flexibilities and everything, that's only 1% of what actually happens when the horn's in your hand. And like Jeff said earlier, it's all just a thought away. So don't get too bogged down in anything that you read on social media. Go back to figuring out who you are, why you believe you are that. And then if you don't like something about that, it's just a thought away to alter it. It's just a thought away.
And even if, say, you are having issues with self-image or anxiety, it's maybe be comfortable enough to reach out to somebody in this forum and tell Dr. Sievers or Bob Slack or whoever, if you don't know Bob Slack, don't just randomly call him, but somebody that that you're comfortable with, and, let them know what you're going through and allow them to speak some of that positive self-image stuff into you, like to help you know how to cope with it. It's like, we're not islands, and it's not like Mr. Adam just said, imagine the sound, poof, and then everything was better for everyone. It's like this was a systematic thing over years where he worked on someone's self-image. So to think that, maybe that we can just say a magic word and then poof, we're there, we got to be honest that we're going to have to maybe lean on some other folks, and especially these people that have studied with Mr. Adam, studied with him for years, and, have really grown up in this and kind of mastered it through their lifetime. To lean on them is smart. And like Dr. Sievers would say, to not do it is stupid. So, it's like if you've got an issue with it, reach out to somebody who can help you with it and help you work on your self-image, or, whatever it is you need to do, or your stage fright or feeling like an imposter or whatever that might be.
One other thing, John, I think I would add, especially if I'm understanding the question correctly, I would say, especially with social media, consider the source.
Oh yeah.
There's a whole lot of, hey, I'm better than you out there. And, there ain't nobody better than you at being you. So, consider the source. I mean, frankly, if it was Phil Smith telling me something, even if it seemed a little cattywampus at the time, I'd go, wait a minute, he's saying that for a reason, and I find this a lot with my own students. I'll assign them a piece and I'll say, now go find a couple of recordings. They'll come back to a lesson the next week and they found John Boy, who's in the 9th grade, playing the piece. And then they'll find somebody, I'm like, no, find somebody who's a representative professional in the world, but generally I've found that those people who are the top echelon players and everything, they're not going to tell you things that are going to, get you head tripping the wrong way anyway.
So is the question a matter of being distracted by social media or negativity on social media as far as performing? Was that,
I think it's a
do we know
comparison.
like specifically what he meant by the question?
I don't mean to speak for John Raymond, but I would say it's a combination of probably largely the comparison game. You know,
Wow.
I know that's one of the things I notice is that there's a lot of comparison that happens, and um, social media as well. Like this is with anything on Facebook or Instagram, when we see a picture or somebody shares a story, we're seeing the highlights from everyone's life, everyone's
Yeah,
best
man.
day.
Yeah, they're not they're not sharing their issues with constipation, right? They're sharing the highlight of their life on there, man. Remember, social media is largely pretend or someone putting their best foot forward. This is not everyday life, and you do have the option to turn your phone off or to take Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever off your phone. You've got, it's again, I think it all goes back to you control what you let in your mind, and it's like, that's where your power is. Thine is the kingdom, so to speak. That's, you can control your mind, and that's all you can control. You can't control what anybody else is doing on social media. It doesn't matter if it's on social media or in real life. It's,
But
you.
what you can control. What is this saying? Be the change you want to see in the world. And when we talk about creating a culture of support and celebrating each other's success, be that,
Yeah.
because people will jump on that boat. People will get on board on that, and then it's contagious.
Everything is infectious, whether it's negative or positive. We need to stay on the positive.
Amen.
Well, I know we're coming close on time here, and so that Rob has time to play the ensemble at the end of the session, I'd just like to formally thank all of these folks who dedicated their time to being on this panel. Um, this is something we love to share as much as we can, and we hope that we can help you. And if anybody on this panel, if you want to reach out to them, I'm sure they would be more than happy to speak with you more at length about any of the struggles that we covered, or some of the strategies for overcoming those things. But at any rate, unless somebody has something else to wrap up with, we'll turn it over to Rob, who appears to be missing in action. Rob. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, if we could kind of summarize some of these strategies, perhaps it would be, quieting the mind, finding ways to concentrate, being good people, having a positive attitude and being secure with yourselves, having a supportive environment as much as you can. And if you don't have it, create one. Probably the one thing we didn't talk about was the last sort of problem thing that I talked about, medical issues, diagnosed issues. But realistically, the short answer there is find someone, your doctor or whomever, to work with and figure out, what your best actions are. If it's something that is more out of control and not something just, you're nervous about going to school because you didn't do your homework or whatever, that's one thing. But, if you chronically have some external conditions that really negatively affect you, I would encourage you to seek out help that way. Rob, I believe we are wrapping up.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap up because we got to get Bob Slack going, doing some teaching here.
Yes, sir.
So, guys, I want to say thank you very much. Is my video switching over? You can't see me. Okay, let me put this so everybody can see. There we go. There's everyone. So, thank you so much, everybody, for doing this. The dealing, like, the things that you guys were sharing today are things that everybody can relate to. I mean, it's super relatable, and just want to thank you all very much for doing this.